How you doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and we're back at it breaking down the latest in Mets land. And in our Big Mets update segment today, we have to highlight a plethora of topics, beginning with Polar Bear Pete Alonso. We all know the market is not shaping up for Pete the way that he would like, the way that Scott Boras would like, but it is certainly the way the Mets would like. And as each day goes by, as each week goes by, Alonso's market continues to shrink at this point in time. And now with Christian Walker, a veteran first base option, signing a multi-year deal with the Houston Astros, we're going to deep dive how this either positively or negatively impacts Alonso and his market and the potential of returning the Mets or not this offseason. From there, we're going to get into a guy that the Mets may defer to should they not bring back Polar Bear Pete Alonso for 2025, and that is veteran infielder, yes, Paul Goldschmidt. From there, we'll get into some key signings that the Mets made today at the minor league level with invites to spring training, the latest from David Stearns himself, and then to cap off the show, we'll hear some remarks from Francisco Lindor on the official acquisition of Juan Soto. Smash a like and subscribe on as your first chime in. Thank you all so much for doing exactly that, as well as thank you guys so much for hearing from our amazing sponsor at BetUS that has you covered with all your sports betting needs. Head over to betus.com.pa today, folks. That way you too can use Wardy's promo code YouTube150. That way you too get a 150% bonus on your first deposit, $125 on your second and your third, up to $2,000 for whatever you want to bet on. And folks, as you guys can see from my two-leg parlay, I have my NFL picks for this weekend. I'm biasly hammering my Pittsburgh Steelers there at +7 and Baltimore against the Ravens. The Steelers have fared very well throughout the past number of years against the Ravens, even in Baltimore to a degree, and even without George Pickens potentially for this next game, I still like the Steelers' odds of bouncing back after what was a tough defeat, without question their biggest defeat yet this season a week ago. We're going to have them at +7 to make sure that they win, or make sure that they don't lose by more than 7 points outright. Then we have the Buccaneers at -205 on the money line, and this is a $20 parlay to win you 35, so a $55+ payout should both these teams win. Feel free to tail these bets, but please know I'm not a sports betting expert, just a diehard fan that loves to place daily bets here at BetUS. And yes, we absolutely hit big with our Knicks play yesterday, which I initially believed was either at the money line or at the spread there, and we put at least a hundo down, so that was really nice. Karl Anthony Towns did exactly what I thought he was going to do. But now, folks, let's place this bet, and let's hop back into breaking down the latest in Mets land, beginning with one Pete Alonso. All right, guys, let's get into it with the Polar Bear, because we know that when it comes to Pete, this is a fascinating situation. Heading into the 2024 season, we were all hoping that Alonso had a great year, obviously. Some people hope he had a little bit of a down year, so that way his value wouldn't be as significant come the offseason. And for anyone who hoped that Pete Alonso would have an underwhelming regular season, you, in fact, had your dream come to fruition. Yes, he balled out in the playoffs, but there's no denying that Pete Alonso, based on recent reports from Jeff Passan and Mark Feinsand over this past day, respectively from ESPN and then MLB.com, have all stated the same, how unfortunately for the Polar Bear and Pete Alonso, he just does not have the market at all that he would like, and that is in large part because of his limited ability as a player, right? Alonso, as much as we love him here in Queens, he is at best an average defender. He's had some above average plays, especially laying out the body, but on a day-by-day basis, defensively, Alonso is around an average defender, and he had a down defensive year last year, as he did in a lot of other key statistics throughout the course of the regular season, excluding playoffs, obviously, because there's a big differentiation between the two. But given the fact that he's not a good base runner, he doesn't have superior defense, and he's pretty much boomer bust as your prototypical four-hitter slugger, he's just been one of the best in baseball since arriving in 2019, so that's why no one has looked at Alonso and say, hey, this guy isn't one of the better sluggers in the game, because he is. But now with a very limited market where there are very few teams that really need Alonso's services, the Yankees reportedly today came out and say, yeah, we're not going to be spending on Pete Alonso. Color me shocked. They will defer to the Paul Goldschmidts, the Carl Santanas of the world, or potentially someone via trade as a stopgap option, at least right now, along with their in-house options. And in the case of the Houston Astros, who we actually predicted on the platform a while ago that if Alonso's going to land anywhere, I like Houston as a potential fit, but as we highlighted in our live stream last night with our buddy James Shiano here on the platform, we both made note that yes, the Astros initially were showing interest, but it appears that Alonso's price point is just too high for what Houston's looking for. So what do? They pivot and they defer to Christian Walker on a 3-year, $60 million contract, and I love that for the Astros. That keeps Isaac Paredes there at third base that they just acquired in the Kyle Tucker trade from the Cubs. So what does that mean, Mets fans? Alex Bregman will no longer be a Houston Astro. So for any Mets fans that are dying to see Bregman come to Queens, knowing that the Mets are one of multiple teams in on him, get ready to either get your hopes up or get really excited, because it looks like things are continuing to trend in that direction where Bregman is no longer at all going to be returning to Houston. And that's because of their reluctance to part ways, to rather to go with homegrown talent on 6+ year contracts. They didn't want to do it for Tucker as a year left on his Alonso deal. They're not going to do it for Bregman. I'd be surprised if Stearns did it for Bregman, obviously, but I understand the emphasis of a well-rounded player and certainly a defensive one there that we saw in Bregman this past season. But a real back in on Alonso here. What does this mean for him and his market now? Well, again, the market is in his favor. And now that another potential suitor is off the board, the Yankees have essentially boxed themselves out from Alonso. Could the Blue Jays overspend and then trade Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? I guess, but how does that make any sense for them? The Seattle Mariners are looking at a trade there for Naylor from the Cleveland Guardians because they know they're not going to spend for Pete Alonso this offseason. So just like that, Alonso's market is unbelievably small. Everything is pointing towards a potential reunion of Queens. And now the big question is, at what price right now? Yeah, I asked a bunch of you guys on X earlier today. We had over 100 comments in reply. What contract do you think Alonso would get this offseason by the Mets? And after seeing what Christian Walker got, and mind you, Walker's not as good as Alonso when it comes to a pure slugger, but he's a very good, very talented first baseman, even as a veteran at 33, 34 years of age now. In the case of the Mets and Alonso, who's right around the age of 30, I think you can easily ink him down on a 4 or 5 year deal anywhere from the $100 to $130 million range there, where there is incentive opt-outs after the first and or second season. That has been thrown out there from industry-wide sources that we've seen, according to Jeff Passan of ESPN as of yesterday. So it shouldn't come as a shock if the Mets structure a contract similarly to what they did initially as they proposed a 7-year extension a year and a half ago at the trade deadline with Billy Epler at north of $160 million. Alonso did not like that at the time because it would be buying out his final arbitration years, and that would be a present-day value of right around $135 million contract or so. Unfortunately for Alonso, he did not do nearly enough throughout the entire course of 2024 to warrant a bigger payday than around that range at absolute most $150. And that's exactly why, should Alonso return to the Mets, it's going to be at a price point that is not necessarily as favorable to him, but can still be favorable to him if opt-outs are involved, if he is given player options after the first and or second year. That way he has full control, and that way he doesn't have the pressure that he otherwise did with Boris initially in a walk year where he did not know how to handle it all, being a first-time upcoming free agent. And that's why you saw the runners of scoring position, the 2-out hitting, the high leverage numbers all completely plummet like never before. They nosedive like we've never seen for Pete Alonso in one statistical season. Even in 2023, those advanced numbers were much better for him than what you initially think based on the baseline numbers and with his wrist injury and everything that happened with Charlie Morton. Fast forward a year and a half later or so now, we see Polar Bear Pete Alonso looking for a payday, but it's more than likely going to be one that's still in favor of what the Mets are hoping to do here. And with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. sets at the free agent market a year from now, that brings upside and incentive for both the Mets to potentially say, hey, if Alonso walks, we don't need to for certain go back for him a year later. And in the case of Alonso, if he bets on himself again with a lack of pressure, because it would be, say, a player option, hypothetically, then it's all just for him to see what he can do. And then if he has a massive year batting behind Soto, great things are going to tend to happen for him in the free agent market a year from now. Basically playing the gamble like what we saw with Blake Snell a year ago with the San Francisco Giants, but this time on an offensive end, here potentially returning to the Mets. So that's the latest on the Polar Bear, everybody. So now let's get into a guy that could potentially replace Pete Alonso. And no one can properly replace Alonso. I'd like to make that clear, but if the Mets are going to replace him, it is reported now that they are active in the market for veteran infielder. One of my favorite bats during his time in Arizona, and obviously those first couple years in St. Louis were absolutely magical, and Paul Goldschmidt. Now, I know the initial reactions right away is like, oh my goodness, Wardy, that stuff stinks. What is it? I know. It's just Paul Goldschmidt's 2024 numbers. I'm aware. The guy's completely fallen off a cliff. 2 years ago, a roughly 7-WAR player, an MVP caliber player. Ridiculous percentiles in baseball, Svon. Absurd numbers. And just like Nolan Arenado, he is an aging veteran whose defensive upside is becoming less and less. He was a -10 defensive player per Fangraphs last year. He was just around a 1 WAR. It's insane to see how much Goldschmidt has dropped, fallen from grace, but that's unfortunately what happens when apologies everybody, when you're with a team that doesn't have enough support around you. That St. Louis Cardinals team has been fun the past couple years at times with their offense, but has been unbelievably Jekyll and Hyde. I think that they were too reliant on solely Arenado and Goldschmidt to move the needle for them when they still need a true star, and that goes without saying. In the case of Goldschmidt, though, a respectable 2024 campaign, just based on previous career numbers, not so hot. 70 runs scored, 22 home runs, 65 RBIs, a 245, 302, 414 clip for just over 1 WAR. League average batter at 100 WRC plus. Mind you, Paul Goldschmidt is literally just a year removed from having some tremendous numbers with the St. Louis Cardinals, right? 2 years removed, I should say, because he had 25 home runs, 80 runs scored last season, 89 runs scored rather, 268, 363, 447 clip for a 122 WRC plus. Then the year prior that we saw in 2022, just an absolute phenom, 35 home runs, 115 RBIs, 317, 404, 579 clip for a 175 WRC plus. We saw, again, some really strong years. Really, 3 strong years as long as he was healthy, and Goldschmidt excluding the short 2020 campaign. Goldie was that guy for many years there, not only the Arizona Diamondbacks, but now the St. Louis Cardinals. And you want to know what Paul Goldschmidt personally reminds me a lot of, especially as a guy who's more of a quiet team leader. He reminds me in so many ways of David Wright, and that's always been the similarity I've had between the two. I know they're different positions. I know that certainly the defensive upside between the two is not the same as is the offense, and how long Goldschmidt has been in his career versus Wright, who had anything short because of his spine, unfortunately. Point is, Goldschmidt is a perfect clubhouse character. He's a veteran leader. He is the exact kind of guy that you want with a nice group of not only veteran leadership, but also youth on the roster. If the Mets are going to allow Pete Alonso to walk this offseason, either because of Alonso's reasoning, because he doesn't want to be a Met anymore, or because the Mets just want to go in a different direction, Paul Goldschmidt, Carlos Santana, these types, in my opinion, are among the best that the Mets can choose from. And I know you might say, Wardy, how does that make any sense? I don't love the idea of Paul Goldschmidt. I'd like to make that clear right now. I know that we're looking at, hopefully, a little bit above league average batter at best next season. But the reason why I'm not completely opposed is because if Alonso doesn't want to be a Met again, it is what it is. If he walks for whatever reason, it is what it is. What is also the case is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is a free agent a year from now. A fellow Dominican player that could pair along with fellow countrymen there and Juan Soto and many others that the Mets have in their organization. Just players of Hispanic descent in general, like, of course, there Francisco Lindor being the captain there for Team Puerto Rico that we saw in the World Baseball Classic. We got Venezuelan players and Francisco Alvarez. We have Nicaraguan players and Mark Vientos. We got more Dominican players if he's not trained, Starling Marte, among others. Point I'm trying to make is that culture has been exciting. It's been vibrant. And that will continue to build for the Mets. And I do think that they have a level of interest in Vladdy Guerrero Jr. should he be able to hit the free agent market a year from now. So the Mets kind of want to play the long game a little bit that they did with Juan Soto, knowing that, okay, maybe we'll make some more lateral moves this offseason, some stopgap options, because no one is worthy of a heavy overpay. I don't think anyone is worthy of a heavy overpay in the current free agent market as we currently stand and talk about it right now, especially on the offensive end. But by adding Goldschmidt, you would have a 1 or at most a 2-year option. This is your JD Martinez for 2025. Just to make it in simple terms, you're going to see very similar numbers between JDM and Goldschmidt, with the major differences. Goldie still knows how to play first base. He's not going to play great defensive play anymore. He's lost that. But he's also going to give you base running ability that's around league average. Again, he stole 11 bags last year. JD Martinez was as incompetent as they come trying to run the bases. The guy was feast or famine with the home run ball, and that was exactly it. In the case of Goldschmidt, you not only have veteran leadership like JD Martinez, in which they were teammates for a short stint during their time in Arizona when JD was there for just a sliver of time. But fast forward all these years later, Goldschmidt wants to be on a team that gives him a chance to win. I think he would thrive in the depth of this Mets lineup, but if you're going to bring in Paul Goldschmidt, I think it makes endless more sense and reason to potentially try to bring in Alex Bregman. If you can hopefully not go more than 5-6 years. I don't like Bregman at 6 years, but I understand that's probably what it's going to take to land someone like him. And then if you have Goldschmidt at first, Bregman at third, Vientos as pretty much your everyday DH, you have shored up your defensive infield much greater for a team that's going to have a lot of ground ball pitchers heading into 2025. But you're also going to have now a unique ability to go back in the free agent market a year from now and go balls to the wall crazy for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. should you wish to do exactly that. Apologies as I got a phone call from my mom because she doesn't know that I'm recording the video right now, and that's fine. But that's everything that I got to say on Paul Goldschmidt, everybody. No, I do not want anyone to replace Polar Bear Pete Alonso. Yes, I'm in favor of Alonso returning, even if it does mean potentially that the Mets don't go hard after Vladimir Guerrero Jr. a year from now. Say he doesn't get opt-outs and a proposed contract to return the Mets on, say, 4-5 years, whatever it may be. But Goldschmidt, he is now in the mix for the Mets to consider should they lose out on Pete Alonso this offseason. So you guys let me know in the comments down below. Are you okay with a short stopgap option there? Do you not like the idea, especially with a lot of things at stake for the Mets in 2025? Lindor, Soto, these guys are at the peak primes of their career right now. And Soto, he's still getting there, as we know, at just a young age of 26. But these guys aren't getting any younger. And the core of the Mets in a lot of ways isn't getting any younger there, not only with Lindor, but Nimmo, and obviously some other pieces as well. So it's going to be a fascinating one to see what happens with Alonso in this market. I do not foresee him to make a decision until after the new year. I could be wrong, obviously, but all eyes are now on Polar Bear Pete when looking at the top slugging first baseman and sluggers in general are now available in the free agent market. Let's see where Paul Goldschmidt will land and how heavy the Mets may consider someone of his services. So, To go from Paul Goldschmidt, everybody, let's get into our next guy on the list, and a couple guys, I should say, is what we're going to highlight right here, right now. And shout out to those Goldie highlights from 2024. Not nearly as strong as 2021 and 2022, but we move, baby. We move. And as we hop back in here now, as I go back into the latest in Mets land for each and every one of you, I did want to make note that, again, the Mets did make some moves. They did make a couple moves that we saw over the past day or so. And they signed Anthony Gose, as well as they also brought in Luis F. Ortiz. They're both signed to minor league contracts, relief options for the Mets that they may consider with spring training invites. Now, Gose, I'm really intrigued by between the two because he has a very fascinating story. For those that don't know Anthony Gose whatsoever, and shout out to Isaac Groffman, our pitching contributor on the platform, that has a relayed right here, a little tidbits on them. New Mets pitchers, Gose throws 101 and average 99.3 in 2022. This year he was down to 95.3, but the slider is great. He's a bit limited in his arsenal, but he has closer stuff. Ortiz is an east-west supernator with an intriguing lefty sweeper shape. So that's just a little bit further of a breakdown, a more analytical breakdown essentially on those pitchers. But in simple terms, Gose was not supposed to be a pitcher in his major league career. He started out his career as actually a really heralded prospect, a center field prospect in the early 2010s. He was actually almost a part of the Noah Syndergaard trade, as a matter of fact, and I did not know that previously. Shout out to James Shiano, who was on the live stream last night with us, good buddy of mine, for tweeting out that earlier. I appreciate that, but this is one of those guys that unfortunately didn't pan out at the MLB level as an outfielder, so that really kind of, that just didn't happen. Fast forward a couple years as we get to right around 2017, he finds himself back as a professional player, but this time as a pitcher. We see him then touch 100 miles per hour there on the fastball, and then the rest is history. So Gose, who that we saw had himself Tommy John surgery in late 2022, he's still trying to find himself as a true MLB caliber pitcher. The guy has electric stuff, but he is simply fastball, slider, throws absolute gas as a lefty, and that is what you're getting. And expand a little bit further on Gose, everybody. Just take a look on what you're getting. This is Gose going back to 2022, during his time there with the Cleveland Guardians. He's pretty simple, too, in his delivery, which I like a lot. But again, he throws 96, 97, 99, 100. The slider has a lot of nice late movement that we see, too. It has, you just love it, especially lefty-lefty, when it's getting guys to absolutely bite big time. But Gose is one of these guys where if the Mets bring him in, again, another spring training, flame-throwing spring training arm for the Mets to consider, and if Gose looks really good, then he may crack the Mets bullpen at some point throughout the course of 2024. I can't see it happening right away, but the Mets have also signed an absurd amount of now 18 pitchers are in the organization of new pitchers that they have acquired essentially this offseason. The exciting thing about that, along with what they already had, is that they have a plethora of arms to consider for both the rotation and the bullpen. What we all want to see, and I'm 100% with each and every one of you Mets fans, we want to see a bigger move. Not only on the reliever front to an extent, but most certainly the rotation. I agree with you, all 1,000%. And we're going to talk about that rotation aspect in just a second from what Anthony DeComo had to say. But before we get to that, let's also highlight the other pitcher that the Mets acquired today, which was Luis F. Ortiz. He has a career 4.76 ERA across 34 innings in his major league career. In 2023, the last time they pitched in the bigs for more than not even a full inning in 2024 with the Phillies, so that doesn't count. But in 2023, 19 innings, a 7.8 K per nine to a 2.3 walks per nine, a 3.3 ERA, and a 3.8 expected ERA. So the limited sample size, he looked really strong there. So the Mets are going to have some crafty bullpen options to consider. Not only guys that throw absolute gas, but a lot of guys that are craftier, that are more of those soft tossers, that are heavily reliant on their breaking and off-speed pitches. They're going to have endless options, and they're far from done making moves. I promise each and every one of you. Apologies for the coughing too, folks. It started last night, a little under the weather right now. So if you guys are wondering why is Wardy maybe not talking as fast as he usually does, spacing things out a little bit, that is why I'm trying to catch my breath with a post-nasal drip. But we do have a couple more things to highlight, and I would like to start with what we saw from Anthony DeComo that we just saw literally earlier today. Shout out to Bavarian Sports Fan for finding this quote initially from Anthony DeComo as he did an interview on Foul Territory today. And in this we see, I really do feel like Roki Sasaki's market is wide open. Says the Mets could land him. Says he could land it, and why. We know the Yankees have interest in Roki Sasaki. We know the Mets met with Roki Sasaki yesterday that we discussed during live stream. Roki Sasaki would do absolute wonders for this Mets rotation. That goes without saying. This is a guy whose absolute ceiling is ace caliber stuff right away. And at absolute worst, you're still looking at someone who can be one of the best starters in Major League Baseball. Just give him, say, the next couple of years at the young age of 22. Roki Sasaki, I'm not going to harp on too much more. It's nice to hear from Anthony Tacoma with that everything that he's heard in the industry, as he firmly believes that the market is really as wide open as it is. Roki doesn't seem to have as much preferences as we initially thought. We'll see if that holds true should he go to the Dodgers, Padres, or potentially East Coast with the Yankees, Mets, or a team that we haven't discussed today. And speaking of discussing with teams, he did in fact meet with the Chicago Cubs today, so add them to the list of a plethora of teams that are showing interest in Roki Sasaki. But guys, we wrap up the show. Let's hear some remarks from our captain and Francisco Lindor and his initial thoughts on acquiring Juan Soto.
And then you get a little bit of a squad upgrade with the addition of Juan Soto. How do you feel Juan is going to have an impact on the Mets for years to come?
He's a fun guy, number one. So and he's an electric player. So that's going to add to the vibes as well, you know. But also his professionalism, how he works, how he prepares, how he's ready to compete day in and day out. I think that's going to go well with the organization, with the culture that we've been trying to grow and we're trying to establish. You know, the job that Steve, Alex, Stearns, and the whole front office and Mendoza are trying to do, with is just build this culture and create an atmosphere where the fans come and have fun, the players have fun, the families enjoy the game, but we're gonna go out there and give everything we got. I think a guy like Juan Soto is gonna help a lot.
And then you get a
Look at how big smile Mr. Smile is. It always makes me happy to see our captain as smiley as he typically is, but makes me even that much more happy knowing that's in hand because of Juan Soto's now a Met. I can only imagine how much these two are going to dominate back-to-back in the labs together for the next decade, and I just simply cannot wait to get to spring training. So that is what I will leave you with, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know your biggest takeaway from today's Big Mets update video in the comments down below. Between Alonso, his current market not shaping up the way that he wants, especially after the Christian Walker deal, to now finding out Paul Goldschmidt could be the Mets' backup option, to then finding out more minor league with spring training invite pitcher pickups, David Stern's masterclass, as we love to jokingly say, because he does these moves so it feels like every single day. Whatever your thoughts are, everybody, drop them down below. Thank you again for watching, and this is your buddy Wardy signing out. Let's go Mets, baby. Peace.